Chinese companies are cutting purchases of U.S. agricultural products. Beijing says it will not rule out levying additional tariffs on U.S. farm products bought after August 3rd. This latest escalation in the China-U.S. trade war comes after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to impose new tariffs on China. Chinese authorities say they hope the U.S. implements the consensus reached by the two presidents in Japan in June and fulfills its promise to create necessary conditions for bilateral agricultural cooperation.
Once again, Donald Trump's tweet dashed hopes that China and the U.S. will quickly reach a trade deal after their 12th round of negotiations in Shanghai last week. While major global markets are still digesting Trump's announcement that Washington would impose a 10% increase in tariffs on Chinese goods in September, Chinese trade analysts gathered to discuss uncertainties and strategies in Beijing on Monday.
The evolution of China-U.S. tensions depends on two major factors. The first is the changing economic situation of the two nations. The second is the negotiating ability and skills to settle the disputes. The core here is how we can keep our willpower and concentrate on our own steady economic growth during the long-term fight.
Just days ago, the U.S. Commerce Department reported that the ongoing disputes has already caused bilateral trade to decline by double digits in the first half of this year. And data from the U.S. suggests that China has now dropped in rank to become U.S. third largest trading partner. Despite the differing opinions of the Chinese trade analysts, one consensus is that China is capable of resisting rising external pressure by making the best of its domestic policies in the long run.
We need to first continue our domestic reforms, especially the supply-side structural reforms. Meanwhile, by opening our door wider, we can strengthen our key role in the value chains within the international economic and trade systems. And we must develop more in new areas like 5G and AI to take the lead in the latest round of the Industrial Revolution. The China-U.S. trade war might spill over into other areas, like the fight for technologies or talents.
When you look back to the China domestic industry, we are growing very well. Actually, I'm thinking why the U.S. negotiator want to make the fire bigger, because they are facing the pressure time, especially the real interest group, like the business sector, like the farmers. They are thinking, what's my interest from the trade war?
Now the world is looking forward to the next round of trade talks scheduled for next month in the U.S. Despite the trade complexities, insiders say an economic and tax separation is unlikely to happen thanks to the high degree of interdependence of the two major powers.
The Ministry of Commerce says China's service trade grew to over 2.6 trillion yuan in the January to June period. That's up 2.6% year-on-year. Data shows service exports rose 9% to 933 billion yuan, while imports went down by 0.6% to 1.7 trillion yuan. That led to a decrease in the service trade deficit of 10.5% to 746 billion yuan.
上半年服务出口
Service trade exports continue the trend of growing faster than imports. The growth rate of exports was 9.6 points higher than imports. That helped the trade deficit of trade in services fall by nearly 88 billion yuan.
Zhu says the service trade's proportion of overall foreign trade grew by 0.5% to take up 15% of the total. Knowledge industry services also performed well. Total trade volume was 892 billion yuan, up 9.4%. Exports came to 467 billion yuan, up 12%, while imports rose 6.5% to 425 billion.
占服务进出口总额的比重达到 34.2%。
The knowledge industry grew to account for more than one-third of the entire service trade, up 2.2%. It went up 9.4%. That was 6.8 points higher than the growth rate of China's service trade in general.
Some knowledge industry fields saw rapid growth in the first half of this year. Growth in exports based on intellectual property exceeded 30% compared to the same period last year. Both imports and exports climbed fast in telecommunications, computer sciences, information services, and financial services.
Mr. Sun was the first in Shanghai to purchase ZTE's 5G smartphone at the Suning store. He made his reservation last month and couldn't wait to test the speed at a formal sale today. It turned out to be even faster than he expected.
It's 10 times faster than 4G. I just downloaded a game which is 1.7 gigabytes and took only half a minute. If there was 4G, that would have taken 6 or 7 minutes.
ZTE's new 5G phone costs around 5,000 yuan. While ZTE became the first to launch a 5G phone, more brands are expected in the market before long.
Huawei will debut its 5G phone on August 16th, and Vivo will launch on August 20th. A whole variety of smartphone brands will debut their 5G phones in August and September, and most of them are Chinese companies.
Buyers can now use 5G phones in only some areas of Shanghai, as the 5G network does not yet cover all of the city. But industry insiders expect rapid development in construction of the citywide 5G network.
The whole world is promoting 5G phones, but China is leading the competition. 5G development is moving very quickly. I expect all consumers in China's major cities will use 5G in 3 years. China is moving very fast in terms of license issuance, related businesses, and base station build-out.
Construction of 5G base station is proceeding nationwide. In Shanghai, more than 3,000 base stations have been built already, and the city is to have a total of 13,000 by the end of the year.
It seems every few days, disgruntled Israelis are clogging junctions and highways, demonstrating against racism, government corruption, disability stipends, plans to draft religious Jews into the army. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is blazing paths when it comes to forging new international ties and agreements. At home, his report card is less favorable.
Mr. Netanyahu's problems, and when you want to give him an overall appraisal, is in the domestic area. There's no question about it.
Problems include a slowing economic output, or GDP per capita rate, during the past half-decade. Food and cost of living expenses are 25 to 75% higher than the OECD average. Critical congestion is hurting productivity. Israelis pay some of the highest car purchase and fuel tax rates anywhere. Protests happen throughout the world every day. In Israel, if there's not a change now, the experts say down the pike, the country is headed for serious trouble. A key issue is education and critical defense spending. In Israel, the two are linked.
About half the children today in Israel are getting a third world education. They belong to the fastest growing parts of the population. So when they grow up, are only going to be able to support a third world economy. A third world economy cannot support a first world army.
Israel's leaders have a history of fixing economic, defense, and political crises under pressure. That may be what's needed to maintain future stability and keep protesters off the streets.
From sniper rifles and bullets to missiles and launching systems, dozens of weapons were lined up for display.
The weapons are bullets for PKS and 12.7mm machine guns. There are 200,000 bullets. There is also ammunition for T-72 tanks and others, night vision binoculars, in addition to U.S.-made weapons that terrorists possessed, like M16's 23mm anti-war jets weapons, and platforms from American anti-armor TOW type missiles, which were used by terrorist groups to destroy Syrian military tanks and armored vehicles.
Several U.S.-made M16 rifles have been seized by the Syrian military also. And here we can see that the original serial number has been eliminated by someone. And they engraved a new serial number here on it, which means they don't want these rifles to be tracked and traced.
Most of these weapons were coated with machine oil for rust protection. This indicates that ISIS and rebels didn't expect the Syrian Arab army to advance so rapidly, and they hope to fight back someday and regain these weapons. Syrian military officials told CGTN that this is not their first time to display weapons and ammunition seized from rebels and ISIS. The number of weapons found shows the huge support terrorist groups receive from many foreign countries.
This huge amount of weapons provides the support the terrorists have from many countries, with the U.S. being a top one. And those weapons have been smuggled from neighboring countries under the supervision of foreign intelligence officers.
Officials also revealed that the recovered weapons will be used as armed supplements for Syrian armed forces to defend the war-torn country